John McCagg with Liberty Aid Academy. And we're going to talk about the trust we have here at Liberty Aid Academy. It's a tax free 501c3 trust. Okay. Some people call them nonprofit, you know, tax exempt. Um, Tax exempt. That's a good one. But this is Liberty Aid Academy, finding financial freedom here, John McCagg. And I had a great question from a student that I wanted to go over it. It's so good. Um, it was a great question about now this trust has 501c3 status, right? And it gets that 501c3 status via this clause here. I'm kind of in the way, aren't I? Via this clause here, and this bit of language in the tax code. All right, 26 U.S. Code 508, Section 508, special rules with respect to 501c3 organizations. Okay, so 26 U.S. Code, that means the 26th chapter of the United States Code. And then 26 chapter is often referred to as the IRS Code because that's where it is in the 26th chapter of the United States Code. So, and that squiggly line is section, so that's section 508. And this is special rules with respect to section 501c3 organizations. I've talked about this a lot, okay? I'm going to talk about generally for a minute, so, in case you're not up to speed. And then I'm going to talk about this great specific question that I had, and I want to answer it for everyone. It was such a good question. And so let's get into it. So this trust, when you get the EIN, has automatic non-reporting 501c3 status, okay? And it gets it via this section of the United States Code. What does this say? Let's start at the top. New organizations must notify the Secretary that they're applying for recognition of Section 501c3 status, except as provided in subsection C. There it is subsection C is down there in exceptions, okay? You skip down there a little bit, and it's the next paragraph, A, B, we're in A, and then we're going to go down to B, and it said, look at C, right? So exceptions, and then there's mandatory exceptions, subsections A and B shall not apply to, right? In other words, every other organization that wants 501c3 status, that's what it says in the top, has to apply, okay? Applying for recognition with the Secretary, unless they're under an exception. All right. What's A? Churches. Okay, great. That church is exempt from IRS tax and from IRS reporting. Great. They're integrated auxiliaries. It says comma. They're integrated auxiliaries, comma. So we've only been introduced to churches so far, right? In this phrase or sentence or whatever. And so it says churches, comma, they're integrated auxiliaries, comma. Okay? And then we have a separate, see how the comma behind churches and their integrated auxiliaries linked it to churches, but now we have a comma and, right? So we have a separation, comma and. So the comma was, okay, this is another thing on the list, but it's and. It's not, a type of church or something, right? It's not. It says churches, comma, their integrated auxiliaries, comma and. So that separates the next thing called conventions. Then it says, or association of churches, or. Okay, here's where the question came in. It was such a good question. Now I've told everyone, this fits under the conventions. It's not. It's like churches. They're integrated auxiliaries. That's another church, and then association of churches, three churches, right? Now his question, which was a really good question, I'm gonna have to go into it a little bit here. So stick with me. His question was, now wait a minute, conventions or association of churches. That could mean not just conventions standing on its own, but it could mean association of churches or conventions of churches. You see what I'm saying? He read it, conventions or associations of churches. But see, that's the wrong way to read it. And I've never read it that way, and let me tell you why you can't read it that way. Great question. It was really a great question. Now, this is why you can't read it that way. It's so good. Now, conventions is, let's step back for a minute. How do we know the what the definition of words are in the IRS code. How do we know the definitions of those words? Well, there's a section of the IRS code that says definitions, right? Has this long list of definitions of all the words. Okay, so uh, um, and then so you look in the word. Oh, I don't know what that word means, right? You go to the definition section of the IRS code. You look up definitions, and in there you're going to look for, oh, I don't know what conventions mean, right? Oh, okay. So you look up conventions, not in there, all right? So nothing under conventions. You follow me? It doesn't say conventions, and it also doesn't say, right, because you look for conventions, it doesn't say a separate identifying subclass of conventions would be conventions of churches, right? Okay, so see, church is in the first one, and then it says, comma, their integrated auxiliary. So those two are linked together. That's talking about churches. The other one, association of churches. Oh, okay. So churches is identified. Association is linked to churches. Association of churches is identified in the IRS code. But here's the thing. Uh, it doesn't identify conventions, so it doesn't identify conventions of churches. And what is a convention? I never heard of such thing anyway. But when something isn't identified within the IRS code, okay, you have to go, okay, where can I look for a definition that will be, generally accepted as a legal definition of something in the IRS code or any other, legal jargon in the United States? And the accepted place to go look for that, accepted authority on all that by everyone in the legal system, the de facto place to go look for definitions is Black's Law Dictionary. Okay, so it's not in this section of code. Right? It's not in the section of code, and it's not in the IRS code. Okay, explaining what convention means. So okay, let's go over because it's or right is it's in conventions or right, so it's two identifiers. I mean two separation on either side of it. It's actually comma and then or, right? It's separated by three different separations by punctuation, and to or, right? It's completely separated from the other things. But if you misread it that way, the way I've never misread it, you're gonna have to go over and look at Black's Law to find it, right? Where it's defined. And let's go to that. All right. This is Black's Law Dictionary, okay? Online, uh, second edition. It says Roman law. It's an agreement between parties. Okay, so I've explained how this fits. There are three parties to a trust. You can only hold two. You can't hold the beneficiary position, nor does it have to be named in the trust. So, uh, you know, two parties is you can be two parties. That's right. Your corporate fiction and then natural person, right? The artificial person and natural person. They're two parties. So those are the two parties. You can hold two positions, right? Those are two parties. A grantor and trustee are two parties, okay? And you can hold the position of both of those parties. But you can't hold the position that there are three parties to a trust, right? As I said, there's trustee, grantor, trustee. I'm sorry, grantor, trustee, and beneficiary. Those three: grantor, trustee, beneficiary. All right. Can't hold beneficiary. You hold the other two positions, and that's the two parties, and that's it. That's what it is. Okay. It's an agreement. You can make an agreement with yourself. That's the definition of convention. Okay? Hope everyone understands that. All right, great. Uh, Such a great question. I just wanted to share this answer with everyone because it really was. Thank you for asking. Somebody really, I love it when I have a great student who sits down and reads literally every sentence of every document and everything I teach and comes back to me with questions, and he cites the exact wording and everything. I love it. It was super well done. Great student. Thanks for pushing for this answer because, I know the answer to stuff, but until I get asked a really good question, I'm not sure what's on your mind. You know what I mean? How you might have a question, maybe you haven't explained something. So it comes from, great students, attention to detail. That's where a great question comes from. And thank you for a great question. All right. But I keep everybody's privacy. If you want to identify yourself who asked this great question, do it in the comments. I'm happy to give you all the credit. But I keep who's who private. Okay. All right. Liberty Aid Academy, the only school with proof. The only school when you get our courses, you can take our courses, you're going to get a great outcome. It's the only place. I'll post my proof. No other accountant or lawyer does that. No other, no other teacher does it. They don't do that. They don't post that. Where's the accountant going? Oh, here's my taxes, and this way you should do it this way. They don't do that. Where's a lawyer going? Oh, here's the outcome of my legal cases for myself and for who I work for. No, they don't do that. I do that. My testimonials are up, and so are many of my students. You can't go wrong here. Uh, anyway, we got into that little detail, and thanks again for that great question. All right. If you have a great question, right, contact at libertyaidacademy.org. Write us and be like, hey, I got a question for John McKeag, right? And great, send us in. Nobody stumps me. This all working. Everything I do, it's been working for a decade, so there's no problems or anything. But I love to get great questions because it just clears the air for not just the one who asked the great question was like, oh, someone else may have this question. So send us your great questions, please. I'm happy to have them, and I'm happy to answer them. Okay, thanks very much.